Welcome back, dear viewers, from the break. And you know, the month of Ramadan brings noticeable changes in people's daily rhythms, from sleep and meal times to work and study patterns, which directly affects energy levels, mood, and concentrations. These shifts are not only physical in nature, but are also linked to behavioral and psychological patterns influenced by changes in daily routines. In this discussion, we explore these changes from a behavioral science perspective and examine how daily routines during Ramadan can be managed more concisely and in a balanced way, helping individuals, family, and workplaces maintain performance and psychological well-being while also building positive habits that extend way beyond the holy month. With that being said, welcome Rawan, Alradhwan, board-certified behavior analyst.
Hi, thank you for having me.
So from a behavioral science perspective, like why do the changes during Ramadan affect our energy, mood? We see a lot of people, be a little bit grumpy, a little bit, bad attitude. So why do we see all of that?
So I think our brains like predictability, and we all have routines. So when that routine changes, especially in Ramadan, I think that our brain is trying to catch up to that predictability. And so it requires a lot more mental energy for us to be able to maintain the new routines that we have.
And speaking about routine, like why does changes in sleeping habits and our diets specifically affect our behavior?
Because there are more people that are much more sensitive to the changes of sleep and the changes of the food intake. And so when you see that there is a lack of sleep or you see that there is changes in someone's blood sugar, a lot of the times you see that it will affect their behaviors, whether they become more irritable or it's harder for them to make decisions, but it does typically affect our behavior because food and sleep is what gives our body and brain energy.
Yeah, and I like how behavior is not something a lot of people concisely think about, but it's affected by so many little things. And during Ramadan, like what are some behavioral habits we can take to make our behavior, our mood and energy all the better?
I think it's very important to try to remind ourselves that everybody is experiencing the same thing. And so when you do sense that you might start getting a little bit irritable or you see that there are some mood changes that are happening, to just take a step back and take a deep breath. I think that's something that a lot of us should practice, specifically in the month of Ramadan being our peaceful month. So I think just breathing and being aware of the fact that you have these emotional changes is one of the most important behavioral things that you can do.
And what about losing focus? Because I know that a lot of people feel groggy or feel out of focus during the fasting period. So what can people do that can remedy all of this?
So the best way to go back and have that focus, make sure that whatever routines you start in Ramadan are consistent during Ramadan. And then making sure that the environment that you're in is providing that, like it's calm enough and your workspace is organized, and that way that you start to become more focused. A lot of the times we do have shortened work hours, but I think it's also important for us to work with our energy. And so if we find that maybe working for an hour is too tiring for us, maybe we should try to work for 40 minutes and then take maybe a 5-minute break and then continue another 40 minutes. Yeah. Specifically making sure that we do the most demanding and our hardest tasks during the morning when we have our highest energy, and then reducing any type of unnecessary tasks, unnecessary decision making. A lot of the time you tend to see that your focus starts to get better throughout.
Yeah, and so is being tired in Ramadan like something inevitable, or is it related to people's routine? Is it something that, because we see a lot of people when they get tired, they're like, oh, I'm fasting, I'm a saim. Is that the normal thing, or is it related to how we are approaching Ramadan?
I think that happens when a lot of the times we try to take the same routines that we had prior to Ramadan and we try to implement them during Ramadan. During Ramadan, a lot of things happen that are different. And so when we try to maintain those same routines, we tend to become a lot more fatigued. If we try to adjust our routines to more of something that fits in the Ramadan structure, I think you'll find that that energy or like that people feeling tired would become less often.
And speaking of people being tired, like what are the challenges that people face whenever, when it comes to their behavioral aspects, behaviors, like what are the challenges a lot of people face during Ramadan?
So most of us face irritability, lack of focus, lack of energy, and it looks different with everyone. You have more people that, or you have some people that are more sensitive to the changes and some people that are more accepting of the changes that are happening to them. In children, you see that they tend to have a little bit more tantrums, they might be more clingy or they withdraw. And with adults, you tend to see either less patience or what we call like a short fuse.
Yeah. And I know that a lot of physicians, highlight the importance of sleep, even outside of Ramadan, right? But a lot of people, especially my circle of friends and acquaintances, during Ramadan, we can help but feel sleepy and sleep. So does our sleeping patterns also affect our behaviors during Ramadan?
For sure. Sleeping is one of the most essential things that we need for us to be able to function. Without sleep, our parts of our brain, like the emotional regulation, self-control, all of those don't work as well. Even decision-making doesn't work as well. So the more you sleep and the more you have a better routine for sleep, the more you're going to function, whether it's during Ramadan, not during Ramadan. But sleep and eating is one of the, or two of the most important things that you need as a human.
Yeah, and both of those things are occurring in the household. So when it comes to families all living together during the holy month of Ramadan, is there something that families can do, as a combined group to make the process easier? Or is it, just one person by each other?
I mean, in Ramadan, a lot of the times, it's not just with family, but everybody starts to gather a lot more. But in the household specifically, if you have consistent routines that you continue throughout Ramadan, you have clear expectations from everything and everyone, having a relatively calm environment, I think that helps a lot more with the things that families might, the issues that parents might face during the home.
Yeah. And speaking of the homes, also parents, especially with kids who are now of the age that they have to fast, right? Yeah. How do those parents approach their kids? How do they prepare them to the shift in drastic diet habits and sleeping patterns and the amount of tiredness they're going to feel like? What is the parent's role in this equation?
So the first thing that's important to think about is that children transition with changes differently than adults do. So a child is going to need a little bit more time than we might. And so if possible, try to adjust the schedule, if you can, a week before, slowly. And so specifically the sleep schedule, because that does become a drastic shift with the children. And so adjusting their sleep schedule prior to Ramadan usually helps with that. But sometimes also keeping a consistent pattern or a consistent habit. So if they have a specific bedtime routine where they take a shower, then they read a story, and then they go to sleep. Sticking to that routine in Ramadan, even if it's not the exact same time, I think helps also with the transition and children being able to regulate a little bit better.
Yeah. And so if we were to put all of this, into little principles, like behavioral principles that we can follow during Ramadan to make the month, feel a little bit easier to tolerate when it comes to physicality, what are those principles that we can follow?
I think the main one is just reinforcement, rewarding all of the things that you're doing and being consistent with that. Because the more you reward the behaviors that you're doing, the more you're going to start to see it even after Ramadan. And I think that's going to be the most important thing. And of course, taking deep breaths. I think that's something that a lot of people can benefit from.
And also speaking of benefiting from these behavioral principles, I know that during Ramadan and Eid, it's like the New Year's, right? A lot of people have New Year's resolutions, and then the day after New Year's, they stick to them, but a week later, they're back to their old habits, which is the same in Ramadan. During the month, a lot of people change their dietary habits, their sleep routines and everything, but after Eid, everything just goes back to normal. Why, from an analyst's point of view, why does that shift in behavior happen and so quickly, so rapidly?
I think because most of the changes that we make or the things that we want to hold on after Ramadan happens during the structure of Ramadan. And we know that the structure of Ramadan is very different than all of the other days that we have. And so when we try to maintain something during the structure of Ramadan outside of the structure of Ramadan, it becomes a little bit harder to maintain it when you don't have the same cues that you had during that structure.
And speaking of structures, does the environment also affect our behavior during Ramadan? Where we are, where we're working, the places we are, the design of the place, do those have effect on our behaviors, our moods, our approach to day-to-day life?
Yeah, 100%. Environment actually affects your behavior a lot more than you think. And so having a very calm environment, making sure that if you do have some sensitivities, specifically when you're not sleeping well or eating well, if you have sensitivities to any lights or noises, making sure that you have reduced light, reduced noises, that definitely helps with the environment and helps you stay calmer as well.
And speaking of the environment, because like you said, it plays such a huge role when it comes to workplace, you know, the workplace habits. Is there something a workplace can do to make the process, the place, the environment, you know, a much better workplace for the employees during this month?
Yeah, of course. I think having flexible hours and understanding that we're all going through the same thing and being as flexible as possible when it comes to maybe certain meetings that you need to have, tasks that may not need to be necessarily completed very soon. But being flexible and providing that support for the employees always makes the workplace better, and it actually makes productivity of employees better.
Yeah. So let's go back to the individuals, because I know for some of my friends, they can tolerate fasting without any issues, right? And then I have some of my friends who, before the month of Ramadan, they start doing like these little, you know, performances where they have intermittent fasting so they can prepare for Ramadan. So does fasting, and especially our behavior, is affected by our lifestyle, or is it something people can tolerate or don't tolerate by themselves?
It's definitely an individual thing. You have some people who are more sensitive to the changes of loss of sleep or their blood sugar fluctuating. And then you have more people, like you said, that do intermittent fasting that are more prepared. So it definitely depends on the person, including the lifestyle they have, the responsibilities that they have, the stress level that they go through on a daily basis. All of that is definitely going to affect the person.
Yeah.
So it definitely depends on what the person is going through and how their body reacts to the lack of sleep and changes in food.
Which also influences their stress levels, like you just mentioned. So we see a lot of people have low tolerance. We see a lot of people have, you know, difference in their sensitivity levels during Ramadan. So how can they combat that if they know the symptoms that they look for?
So it's definitely something that happens biologically, because parts of the brain, when you don't have enough, you know, nutrients or enough sleep, don't work as well. But I think it matters to the person individually. There's going to be certain things that each person does that's going to help them go through Ramadan a little bit better. But having certain habits that they carry on throughout the days and being consistent with those habits, I think will help, because one of the main things that happens in Ramadan is that routine change, right? And so routine actually, or having that routine keeps our neural pathways going. And so when we have that change of routine, we need to redevelop new neural pathways. And so I believe that biologically it does take a lot more of a toll on you because every single person's brain has to catch up in a different way. And that's actually why sometimes Ramadan feels easier later on as compared to beginning of Ramadan, because our brain starts to adapt.
Yeah.
So I think it depends per person, but find one habit that works for you and keep it consistent, and I think that will help.
And you know, speaking of finding a habit that can work for you, so that it's all about consistency, what are like, because a lot of people fear change because they are afraid of making monumental changes or big changes. So that's why they stay on what they know, right? They stay on their comfort level. But what are small routines that people can change in their daily life to, you know, make the process smoother?
I actually think the small changes is what you see a better result. And the big drastic change, you may not see a very big result, but the more consistent with the small changes, the better the result. One thing that you could do, I like to pick an easy task that I can do every day. Whatever it is, like it can be different tasks, but it's one simple task that I can do specifically in the morning. And if I finish it, I feel very productive for the rest of the day because I felt like I started off on a really good note. That kind of habit can definitely be something that can carry on as well after Ramadan. But I think that that is a good habit that people can take on.
And especially during this month, because I know, you know, it's customary for, especially during this month, that nobody eats alone, right? It's always right set of timing for the breakfast, and then right set of timing for suhoor, right set of timing for the imsak. It's always in groups, right? Every household has the family together during these times, eating together. So does working on a specific, I would say, schedule of eating and sleep during this month affect their rewiring of the brain for the longer term? Or is it something, you know, just in the short term and then back to normal?
Oh, so it does definitely change it in that short term. But when you do change your routine back to the previous routine, it will go back. And so your brain is constantly developing new pathways anyways. And so I think that having those specific times in Ramadan, because it isn't very typical to the times that we would typically eat or, you know, have those routine. And so I think it will definitely change back once you start to go through the other routine again.
And now we've spoken and highlighted a lot of things that people can change in their daily life to, you know, better their understanding of how their bodies work and how they can tolerate, you know, the physicality of Ramadan better. But if you were to pick just one key principle out of all of this, that say this is what I think is the most important thing that people can focus on to better their experience, what would that be?
Try to keep it very simple and work with your energy. Everybody has different energy levels during Ramadan. Like you said, some people practice before, some people just go straight into it. And so work with your energy as much as you can, be consistent, and try to reward yourself throughout the month.
Yeah, I think a lot of people underestimate the power of consistency, right? A lot of people don't really think that sticking to a certain routine can make them better for the whole experience. Or even like you said, small changes can have large results.
And even after Ramadan. And it's not just during Ramadan. So like being consistent helps you maintain whatever habits that you're holding onto during Ramadan, after Ramadan, assuming that that habit also will fit into your daily normal life. Like if you pick up a habit that's not going to fit into your normal daily life, then it becomes hard to be consistent with that habit after the Ramadan structure is no longer there.
Yeah, very well said. I'd also like to thank you for being our guest for today's episode of Good Morning Kuwait. You know, this has been really, I would say, helpful, encouraging people to also tolerate the month with better ease of understanding it. So thank you for being our guest.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
We are going to take a break, ladies and gentlemen. We'll come right back after this one.